Yeah. So, I mean, we could talk about healthcare this entire episode.
Right.
This actually is kind of pertinent to my point is that, we're talking about ideals that the US government should be, and it's what the US government isn't. The government that we have doesn't care about us at all. It
Right.
cares about its donors, it cares
Right.
about all these corporations. So the what we should be doing is trying to remove the people who are in power now, and then you and I could have this argument after that's done, because it's a completely moot point at the moment, right? Because all the people in power don't want any of the ideals that we'd be looking for, whether it's like a more free market system that I want or a more socialist system that you want. Both of them are going to be tainted by who is in control right now. So
Yeah.
the priority is removing them and getting people who are actually going to do what the people want them to do, right?
Well, I don't know if that's going to work. I think that what we have to do is remove money out of politics. So I don't think it's the person. I think any single person is corruptible. I think you're corruptible. And I think I'm corruptible. I think everybody's corruptible. And I think it's naive for us to think we're not, right? I think the human condition, unfortunately, is very fragile. And I think all of us have the propensity to become animals who riot and commit atrocious acts. And I think all of us have the propensity to become corrupted people. Everybody's got some people easier than others for sure. But nonetheless, I think we all have those moments where we potentially could become animalistic or greedy, or, we just got those, the gluttony and all of that stuff. So like all of us, we have all of us have the propensity to become fat, and lazy and all this. So I don't know if removing the people and putting in new people is going to work. Especially I look at somebody like AOC, who, for people that were on, more on my side of the aisle, really were hopeful with her that she would actually go in there and shake shit up and like say, okay, we're gonna get the money out. We're gonna call out all the money and call out all the people that are in the pocket of donors, and we're gonna go and do this. And that's just not what she did for a minute when she got there. But then that quickly ended when she had a nice talking to by Mama Bear, Nancy Pelosi, who basically sat her down and said, listen, stop fighting with me, fight the Republicans. We need to go after a common enemy rather than each other. So why don't you go after Republicans and the white supremacy happening in the Republican Party? That's the big enemy. And AOC was she was able to be essentially corrupted. And I don't think by big money donors, but I think by fame. And I think that the feeling of fame, getting magazine covers, being a trendsetter, tweeting and having everybody pay attention has gone to her head. And that now has created a situation where she doesn't want to lose her power. And that's what really fundamentally comes down to all of these politicians, is it's not so much about, their big money donors they're keeping them in power, and all of them have tasted power and they love it and they don't want to lose it. They don't want to go back to their regular civilian lifestyle. And so I don't know if removing the people is going to help so much as removing the money and the donors. Then we will have an issue of dealing with sort of the issue of fame, right? And how these politicians are able to be famous. And that'll be where we then, as people say, the fame has gone to your head and we're getting you out of there. But that's a lot easier to do if they're not backed by big money. When they're backed by big money, it's really hard to get them out, because they can spend endless money to keep their message on track and ours buried. And we see what they've been able to do with big tech. I mean, I don't think big tech gives one iota about viewpoints and censoring those viewpoints. I don't think that's actually big tech doesn't care, but their politicians care. The people protecting them care. And if they want to continue to be protected, or to protect themselves from the threat of those in power, they have to do what those in power want. And the people in power, Nancy Pelosi wants YouTube and Google to censor any negative content about her in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
And so they do, not because it's good for them. It's not good for them. It's not good for their business. There's nothing free market good about big tech censoring or deplatforming people. It's bad for them, actually, right? But they do it to protect their investment. and that is the politicians. So it's a lot easier for us to get rid of people if they're not backed by big money.
Mm-hmm.
So I
So
think we have to get rid of the money.
yeah, I want to talk about the money. I mean, you just kind of exemplified it with talking about big tech. It's a two-way street, right? In my mind, we have to also end the control the government has over the economy. They shouldn't be able to bail out all these
Right.
businesses. You know, they shouldn't be able to. We were just talking about healthcare earlier with pharmaceutical companies, you know, protecting their monopolies on medicine. None of this should be legal in the first place, because if you just remove one side, like let's say we institute some sort of campaign finance reform, or we ban lobbying or something, it seems like they're going to find a way around whatever blockades we put in, getting dark money to people that's not transparent to the rest of the country. So in my mind, you know, we have to attack it from both sides. I'm a fan of campaign finance reform, but as long as the government has all this control over the economy and picking winners and losers, and you know,
Right.
striking certain companies down. I mean, that's what's been going on with the lockdowns. You know, like certain companies are allowed to stay open, other ones are forced to shut down. As long as the government has that power, there's always going to be some form of lobbying that's going to try to circumnavigate whatever obstructions we put in place.
Right. But if we were able to get the money out of politics and say you can't be funded, your campaigns can no longer be funded in this way, then it would be easier for us as voters to select candidates who maybe share that worldview. You know, candidates that say, look, we've got, you know, because at that point, because what you're talking about is regulation versus deregulation, or like government subsidies or government social, you know, government welfare, right? You're talking about those things. And those are more ideological, actually. So some people will believe that, no, the government needs to incentivize and the government needs to be involved. And others will say, no, we just want total free market. We don't want government intervention at all. That is really ideological. And I think it's fair for us to have those ideological debates and for us to vote on candidates based on those ideologies. But we can't do that when the candidate, when those candidates are buried and their messages are buried by big donors, because really you and I don't get to select candidates based on ideology. We're instead essentially shoved candidates that are what the corporations want. They're in control. The corporations control our government. And until we can end the corporation really running our government, controlling our government, you and I can't even begin to select politicians based on ideology.
So how do we sever them without getting people in there to do that? I mean, how do we like how do we get there?
That is a really, really good question. And that is the real challenge. We have to get people in there. You know, that's the problem, is you sort of have to play the game in order to defeat the game, right? Like you've got to play it all the way to the very end until you defeat it completely. And then write your own rules, I guess. And so we have to start electing candidates where their sole focus is money out of politics. And it's got to be, you know, and I think that needs to be the message that all of us need to have going forward. We need to unite in this one message. And we could say, look, you and I can disagree on the medical stuff. You and I could disagree on the ideology of whether or not the government should subsidize in order to encourage certain behaviors by the public, or if the government should completely stay out of it, right? We can have those debates later. We can disagree on those now. The one thing we need to agree on, and we need to just say, look, we're only going to vote for the candidate who says, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to vote to completely unravel the money grip that corporations have on our politics. And we have to unite around that message. And if we can all agree on that and say, I don't care if you're left, right, center, I don't care. We need to agree on this one thing. And we need to go in there and hand these politicians their asses and say, you're done, we're in, and we're dismantling this money system. And we're going to bring the government back to the American people. And then once we give it back to the American people, guess what? The American people are going to decide what kind of society they want to live in. And we don't know yet because they haven't been able to choose for the longest time.
Yeah, so I got an interesting question for you. The people who campaign the hardest on getting money out of politics, most of those people are the ones who voted for the CARES Act or voted for the stimulus bill at Christmas time. The ones that you can consistently see voting against this are the libertarian ones.
Right.
Rand Paul, Justin Amash, Thomas Massey. And their opinion on money in politics, it mostly comes down to transparency usually. So if we're uniting behind candidates who want to get money out of politics, but they don't end up doing that, what's the point? Like uh, everyone who has made that such a central point of their campaign,
Yeah.
most of them just sold us out and just did it anyway, where the libertarian minded ones are actually the only ones who have really stood up for us at all this time.
Yeah, I think the reason for that is because it's not the loudest message in the room. It is a message, and it's a message that's sort of growing. But at this point, it's not the loudest message in the room. And until it is the message, and until people are willing to actually hold the politicians accountable, and they need to understand what that means. They think, well, let's vote Joe Biden in, and then let's hold him accountable. It's like, no, that's not the way it works. The way you hold them accountable is you don't let them in office. You make them lose their job. That's how you hold them accountable. And so I think what needs to happen is it needs to be the loudest message, and they need to be afraid of losing their jobs, because we, the people, say, if you continue to take corporate money, and if you don't rewrite the rules, for one, like what I want done are 2 rules totally rewritten in there. I want the rule of money, how the campaigns are funded, completely changed. And I also want ballot access to be completely changed and that needs to be handed down state by state needs to do it. But those 2 things need to really change. If we could change ballot access and all this, the rules around ballot access, and we could actually have a viable 3rd party or 4th party or 5th party or 6th parties even that rise up. Well, we'd also need a little bit of electoral college reform on that, because at this point you have to get 270 to win. So even if there's 5 parties running, one of them has to get 270. That always ultimately reduces us down to a 2-party system. But, not totally necessarily. I mean, France has it similar. They have like a similar system, but they have a giant election where there's like 10 different parties running. And then the last 2, it kind of dwindles down to the final 2, and people have to sort of choose. So it is a little bit like ranked choice voting in some ways, sort of. A different way of doing it, but I think that could work too. But we have to dismantle that system a bit, in order to really truly allow the American people choices in the political system. And that just has to be the loudest message in the room. And right now, the loudest message in the room is racism, right? That's the only thing anybody's talking about. They're like, yeah, but all of these racists. And it's bullshit. It's not real. It's not true. I sit there and I ask people, how many white supremacists do you actually know? Like, list them. If there's such a threat and you think it's half the country and it's like knocking on your door today, then tell me who these people are so we can go, let's list them. Let's put their picture up and name them, I guess. But they can't. They're like, no, I just know they're there.
Yeah, I don't know if you know who Dave Smith is, but I had him on my show a couple of days ago and we were talking about that. If you look at who is backing all this like dangerous white supremacist narratives, it's all the people who are benefiting off of what's going on, because they're just making a distraction to throw the scent off of the actual corruption that's taking place. They're getting people to look at a boogeyman that doesn't really exist.
And it's been the narrative of this country since the dawn of time. They've used racism forever, whether it be a racist or now don't be a racist. But either way, it's been racism has controlled the narrative to allow the rich to continue getting wealthier and wealthier. And it's crazy that people don't see this. I mean, they sit there and say, no, we'll deal with the wealth problem later. We've got this racism issue today. And it's like, through time, the wealthy have only become wealthier because of this. It's not slowing down. It's not, plateauing or even reversing. They're getting richer. And it's because we continue to buy into these narratives of either be a racist, back in the day, be a racist, or don't be a racist. Either way, racism dominates the conversation in this country, and it's such a distraction. It's a huge, it's not the thing we need to focus on.
Yeah. So to kind of bring this back to what I was originally trying to dissect is when I was working on Tulsi's campaign, there was a chunk of issues I disagreed with her on, and I was trying to bring people in to vote for her, and they wouldn't do it because of a chunk of issues. And I was like, yeah, but you agree with her on all this important stuff. And they're like, yeah, but this one's a deal breaker for me.
Mm.
Um, and I then when the primary ended and she dropped out and everything, I went over to the Libertarian Party and I was trying to get people to vote for Joe Jorgensen, and it was the same thing. It was like, okay, yeah, I agree with her on the wars and the Patriot Act and all this stuff, but I don't agree with her on like these couple things. And it was just so aggravating to me because we've got these huge central issues that are causing us so much strife and so much pain and destroying this country. And we're letting a lot of the kind of fringe stuff drive us apart. So to me, what has to happen is we have to unite around like 6 central issues or something that
Maybe
really
even less than that, like 3
maybe,
or 4.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'll take 3 or 4.
Right.
So I wanted to talk with you about what those issues are. You've already brought up a few. These are just some ideas I have.
Okay.
And some people are going to, I want to get into the lockdowns later, just because you've been so good on that. But that's one issue, end the lockdowns. I think a lot of people could agree on that. End the wars, end or audit the Fed and end corporate bailouts, end the war on drugs, end massive surveillance, and election reform. And election reform that would encompass getting money out of politics, like you just discussed.
Yeah.
Um, what else would you add to that? Would you take any of that away? What do you think need to be the central issues that we can actually get a lot of people to unite on?
I think those are good. I mean, I definitely think those are, money out of politics, election reform, ending, big, ending corporate control of our government in however way you want to phrase that. Yeah, I mean, I think those are all really, really good. I just think that the issue is, I just think there's too many people that will prioritize like Medicare for all, or they'll prioritize the Second Amendment or abortion issues,
Right.
um, and so they get into these issues that really, it's those aren't going to those again, those issues are issues that you and I can have ideological discussions about once we get our government back,
Right.
but we don't even have control of our government. So we could sit here and disagree on all these ideological issues all day long. It doesn't matter because we're not making decisions.
That's
Uh,
actually
uh,
that's what they want us to do. They want us to argue over abortion and gun control and the Green New Deal or whatever,
right.
while they get all these corporate bailouts, while they reap the benefits of these lockdowns, and we don't unite against them because we're fighting with each other.
Yeah, they just want us to think like it's all the morality stuff. So that's why it's the racism stuff, it's the abortion stuff, it's the guns, it's it's all of these things. And we are not able as a society to run our society right now. And until we understand that, until that is like beaten into everybody's head that we are not in control of our government. So it doesn't matter if you and I disagree on everything.
Right.
We're not making any of the decisions. So what we need is we first need to get control of our government so that then we can argue all day.
Right.
And then we can sit there and, throw them out at each other and being like, yeah, you're wrong. We can but we don't even have the luxury of disagreeing and arguing in heated debates about these things in a way that actually matters. We don't have that choice.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to get back to a place where I would be supporting Tulsi Gabbard's opponent, right? Because of what I disagree with her on, versus
Right.
the fact that right now I agree with her on 80% of the stuff, and it's so much more important than the stuff we disagree on. The goal is to get to where we can start arguing about
Yeah.
all this
Right.
all this stuff.
Right. And that's what people need to understand is I want to be able to argue with you and disagree with you in a way that's actually meaningful and matters, right?
Right.
In a way that if you and I can convince the population of your point of view or my point of view, when they vote, it will actually result in what they wanted when they voted. But right now that doesn't happen. Right now it's what do the corporate overlords want? And ultimately they keep us fighting over all of these things and they don't do anything about them ever because their corporate overlords say, no, keep that issue going because we need that. We can't solve that problem. We need to keep it going because we need those people to continue yelling at each other and distracted by that issue so that we can then continue to do all these other things and suck up all the money from the American people
Yeah.
and from people all around the world, quite frankly.